Typhoon Soudelor, the strongest storm system of 2015. If you're in the Philippines, you actually may know it as Typhoon Hana. And regardless of what you call it, this storm system was a very dangerous and eventually very deadly system out here in the Western Pacific. So in this update, we're actually going to be breaking down this storm system, starting with its origination back on July 29th around Pohnpei Island there in Micronesia. It originally took a little bit of time to actually form up, but once it did, it started to intensify, and on August 2nd, it rapidly intensified before impacting the island of Saipan, actually catching many people off guard. Now, of course, this storm is going to be known for its impact on Taiwan and China, but I do not want to shy away from the significant impact it had on the Micronesian islands, and specifically the island of Saipan. No casualties were thankfully reported, but the winds out here very well could be as strong as Category 3 to Category 4 strength on the Saffir-Simpson scale. Hundreds of buildings were actually destroyed, thousands of trees were snapped, and widespread power outages were reported, and initial estimates indicate that very well could be upwards of a month after the storm system hit for the power to be completely restored on the island of Saipan. And you can even see in these images here that the winds very well could have been as strong as a Category 3 to Category 4 storm system. I like to think of this storm actually as a dart being thrown at a dartboard as far as the odds of this amount of impact on the island. It is a small island out here in the Western Pacific, and the storm had a pinhole eye at the time. So basically, the odds were definitely very few for this storm system to directly impact the island of Saipan, but it did, and that was the impacts we've seen. Now, I do want to make another note. The ASOS, or the weather instruments used at the Saipan airport to measure the air conditions, severely malfunctioned during the storm. Actually, the wind gauge was knocked out, and then the temperature gauge was knocked out. So the instruments there actually reported heavy snowfall because it was thinking the temperature was at 0 degrees with zero visibility. An incredible just malfunction, and this was obviously in air, but it does show you the intensity of the storm to make the ASOS really think that way. Now, on the 3rd of August, it actually did track back out west, back out in the open ocean, leaving behind at the Micronesian islands, but it moved over a warm pocket of water and into an area of reduced vertical wind shear. Furthermore, dual outflow channels aloft. We had an outflow channel providing exhaust to the north and one to the south. Now, if you know anything about tropical systems or you follow typhoons or hurricanes, you know these are all prime conditions for development, and that's what we've seen. Pressure on the 3rd of August dropped down to 900 hectopascals. We saw max winds estimated by the Japan Meteorological Agency at 215 kilometers per hour. Now, to put this in perspective, we had not seen a storm system of that intensity in the Atlantic since 2005. Now, there is some good news. The storm did not maintain this absolutely intense super typhoon intensity as it started to approach the southern Japanese islands and the island of Taiwan. On the 4th and 5th, it started to weaken. It gradually did re-intensify on the 7th as it moved over an area of warmer water just east of Taiwan, but it was not at that super typhoon level. Now, in Japan, they actually did see some impacts from this storm system as well. Ishigaki reported winds upwards of 200 kilometers per hour, and we also seen upwards of 400 millimeters of total rainfall. The good news, Ishigaki and all the southern Japanese islands, for that matter, are prepared for typhoons. The locals take this in stride. They get them many times a year, so there was no damage really reported here. On the morning of the 8th of August, 2015, Typhoon Soudelor came crashing ashore around Hualien City there in eastern portions of Taiwan. Now, of course, the worst of the storm was in the right front quadrant around Yilan City, where we've seen all these viral videos actually flying around of mopeds flying in the air, trucks tipping over, buildings being flipped over. Just absolutely intense, and I know this all sounds very exaggerated, but that's the way the storm system came on shore with its persistent winds and definitely the very high winds. But that wasn't the only problem. It was the rainfall. One location in northeastern Taiwan reported upwards of 1,300 millimeters of rain. This caused severe flash flooding, washing away entire villages in some cases. Hundreds of buildings were lost, and the severe flooding even continued for several days after. Now, I even went to Taiwan to document this storm, ended up in Hualien City where the right front quadrant was originally supposed to hit before the storm system made a gradual wobble towards the northwest just prior to landfall. But still, I went directly through the eye. Actually, pressure here dropped down to 954 hectopascals based on barometer readings in the city. You can see it here from this graph from iCyclone. Josh Morgan provided this to us, and it just shows you that pressure dropping down, and then it rapidly went back up after the eye passed. This is where the highest winds were. This is where I actually shot this video, just showing the debris flying around. We were seeing heavy rainfall at the time, just absolutely blinding rain. Winds likely gusting over 100 kilometers per hour there in the city on the rear end of the eye wall. Now, the good news, the southern end of the storm, though, it was sheltered by these absolutely massive mountains there in Taiwan. And that's one of the big stories of this storm at any typhoon that hits Taiwan. It's the heavy rainfall when it hits those mountains that squeezes it out, and it often results in very severe flooding. As I'm making this video, the death toll actually in Taiwan alone rose to 8. It very well could have been worse. The Coast Guard was going out and about up and down the eastern seaboard, telling people to get inside ahead of the storm system and definitely stay away from coastal areas. Now, it's not just the winds, the rainfall, and the storm surge, but also the outer rain bands of typhoons can often bring, well, very dangerous and deadly aspects as well, including tornadoes. Now, this video right here, this is absolutely incredible. You may have seen this already. One of these fast-moving tornadoes wrapped up in one of these rain bands swept through here, swept a car about 200 yards down a road here. A woman on a moped just completely thrown to the other side of the road. You can see her sitting there on the side. And this is one thing I often state, especially when you go through these typhoons and you're missing the eye of the storm system or right in the right front quadrant, you still could see the severe weather. And that is one thing about tropical systems and why there is such a big warning area on these, and we talk about the cone of air more than that center line, is that things like this very well could happen. Also, I do want to note the storm disrupted travel quite significantly on Taiwan. The northeastern portion of the island was completely cut off from the south, and we actually, myself and several other storm chasers included, had to drive all the way down to the southern tip of the island, wrap around the mountains, and drive back north to get back to Taipei in the northwestern portions of the island. Now, after the storm system passed over Taiwan, it impacted China later on that evening, making landfall in Fujian province around 10 p.m. on the 8th of August. This storm actually has been estimated to be one of the worst typhoons to hit that province in over a decade. In total, all of China saw upwards of 26 casualties here. We saw severe flooding, landslides as well, and those damaging winds near the coast. Now, in total, a staggering 513,000 people were evacuated from coastal areas here in China ahead of the storm system, and also after it impacted due to the threat of flooding and landslides. Furthermore, in China alone, this is a billion-dollar event. $2.14 billion to be exact is what the initial estimates are on the amount of damage the country received due to Typhoon Soudelor. Even as we went into the 10th and the 11th of August, the storm continued to bring rainfall across much of China before starting to work its way towards the northeast into parts of Korea and Japan. And even in Japan, after it already became a tropical depression, by midweek on the 12th of August, it brought record-breaking rainfall to Nagasaki Prefecture. Upwards of 80 millimeters was reported here in a 1-hour span. Now, I also do want to note this storm system comes within a already record-breaking typhoon season. So that begs the question, what is causing all of these typhoons? Is it El Nino? Is it part of global warming? I actually want to hear your feedback down there in the comment box below, so please go ahead, put some comments there. But for now, I'm meteorologist Robert Spetta. This is WesternPacificWeather.com, and as always, thanks for watching.